What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was raised by Orochimaru and fell for a girl created in his lab? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. The smile that spread across her innocent face was radiant. The ornamental hairpin placed expertly through her tresses giving her hairstyle a much more formal look. A small bell was attached to one end of the hairpin and it tinkled melodically as her small feet produced light taps as she walked through the hallways of her estate. She accelerated her pace, since the length of her stride was limited by the kimono she wore. She was dressed ostentatiously for an important event in the village of Leaf. The kimono she wore was colored sunshine yellow with a design of sakura flowers throughout the fabric. Around her waist was an obi colored a darker shade of pink, and embroidered on her back was the yin-yang symbol surrounded by the 8 markers, which represented the symbol of the Hyuga clan. She looked radiant. She felt like the embodiment of Hyuga grace, elegance and perfection. And she could not wait for her mother and father to see her. Still moving as fast as her kimono would allow, she came to a brief stop, wanting to make one last check of her attire before turning the corner to the room where her parents undoubtedly awaiting her arrival. She hesitated, however, as she saw 2 people enter the room before her. People she did not expect, nor have an inclination to see. The Hyuga elders. Ever since she had been introduced to them, she had always been frightened whenever she was in their presence. "Hiyashi, your daughter has started attending the academy this year, correct?" the lady elder asked in a stern voice. "I have witnessed your training sessions with her. She has not shown significant improvement with her skills. I can clearly remember when you were her age. She's not even 1/3 as skilled as you were at the time you entered the academy." Hiyashi looked stoically back at the elders. "I am properly and strictly training my daughter day by day. She will improve. We do expect that to happen, however we have not experienced a situation like this before. All heirs and heiresses for several generations prior have been natural-born geniuses, and lately, the heiress performance has been very low," the male elder said, and the lady elder nodded in agreement. This time Haruka, the kind wife of the Hyuga clan leader, decided to speak. "Please, Hinata is still a child. We cannot expect too much from her right now. She's still in the process of learning. You say this about your own daughter. However, Hyuga Neji was able to master chakra control to a far greater extent when he was her age. Hisashi's son is but a year older, yet he has never failed to surprise us with his skills. He has and continues to perform far better than your Hinata, so we expect that these improvements you are so confident about will appear sooner rather than later." The lady elder grinned maliciously at the couple. "After all, we have no use for failures within the main branch. She is my daughter. She knows what is expected of her." Hiyashi shot back. "She will not be a failure or disgrace to either the main branch or the Hyuga clan." "That is good to hear, Hiyashi," the male elder replied, seeming to humor the clan head while inwardly dismissing his statement of confidence. "We will take our leave now. We expect to see you later, since the Hokage has specifically requested your presence at the festivities tonight." Hiyashi and Haruka bowed respectfully as the elders turned to walk out of the room. They had intended to follow but halted as the elders stopped short once they entered the hallway, gazing sternly in a specific direction. Wondering what caused the elders to suddenly stop, she followed their gaze and saw a small figure in yellow behind one of the wooden pillars in the hallway, feebly attempting to hide herself from the elders' presence. Haruka's motherly instincts immediately took over and she rushed forward to her daughter's side in less than a second. With just one look, everyone knew that Hinata had overheard the entire conversation. "Train her better, Hiyashi," the lady elder said, her eyes apathetically looking down at the little girl who clung to her mother's leg in fear. With that grim statement hanging in the air, the elders turned and walked away, leaving the family to themselves. The smile that had adorned Hinata's face as she made her way through the hallways on her way to see her mother and father had completely disappeared once she had overheard the conversation. She had never liked the Hyuga elders, however these 2 provided her with an additional level of fear because they were also her grandparents. Ever since the first day she met them, they had always been very abrasive and judgmental towards her. This was not the first time that she heard them talking about her. Whenever they visited, they always made a point of talking about how weak and untalented she was, especially her grandmother. They never showed one bit of warmth or kindness towards her, or even acknowledged her as their granddaughter. "Hinata, what are you doing here? You should be with Ko right now, waiting for us at the front gate." Her mother bent down to caress her daughter's cheek. She could clearly see the sadness in Hinata's face. I just wanted to let Okawa-sama and Otoyu-sama see me in my kimono before everyone else did." Hinata answered innocently to her mother, before looking over to her father who stood his ground firmly only a few yards away. His cold stare bore towards her, turning her hopeful expression grave and draining her confidence, causing her to look uncomfortably down at her feet. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop." Without saying anything back to the timid heiress, Hiyashi turned on his feet to leave. "We should go," he said stoically, not even bothering to address them face to face. "We cannot be late for the festival." Haruka straightened from her bent position and gently took her daughter's hand. "Let's get going, Hinata." When Hiyashi was far enough away and had turned the corner of the hallway in front of them, Hinata pulled her mother's hand and they came to a halt. Haruka looked down at her daughter, who was staring back at her with inquisitive eyes. "Okawa-sama?" she asked in a solemn voice. "Am I a failure?" The question caught Haruka off guard, albeit only slightly considering the conversation her daughter had overheard. A look of anxiousness completely occupied her beautiful face as she urgently faced the poor girl, who was striving to hold back her tears. "Listen to me, dear. You are not a failure, do you understand that? Don't believe anything that you heard in there. You are our daughter, the future leader of this clan, and no matter who you are and what you are to be in the future, I will always be happy to have you as my child." She pulled her daughter into a tender hug, whispering gently into her ear, "Your father and I love you very much. Don't ever forget that, no matter what happens." Hinata nodded weakly as her mother pulled away from her. "I understand, Okawa-sama." Haruka smiled and landed a small peck on her forehead. "Now, we don't want to go to the festival with you looking all sad, right? And don't forget, your 5th birthday is only 3 days from now. You should be thinking happy thoughts about that, since you're about to meet your uncle and cousin." Her young, childish mind quickly flitted from dwelling on her grandparents' comments to those of a much more joyous nature, the memories of the conversation slipping from her mind. Her bright smile once again lit up her face, filling her with excitement. Not only because it was her 5th birthday, but also because of her upcoming meeting with her prodigal cousin. "That's more like it. Now, let's go. We shouldn't keep your father waiting any longer," Haruka said cheerfully, relieved that her daughter had forgotten her troubles for the moment. Together, they made their way through the vast hallways of the estate, Hinata walking excitedly ahead of her mom while Haruka trailed behind, staring happily at her daughter. Then without any warning Haruka halted her steps, automatically covering her mouth with a white handkerchief she produced from one of her kimono's sleeve pockets. She wheezed and coughed a number of times, and with every one, she felt as if the life was being pulled from her body. Her hand reached out, using the wall for support as Hinata watched the spectacle, a look of worry on her innocent face. "Are you all right, mother?" Hinata asked concernedly. Haruka tried to straighten herself, putting on a false smile for her daughter. "I'm fine, dear. Just allergies. Run along to your father, and I'll catch up with you." "You don't look fine, mother, maybe I should call for help," Hinata said. "I'm fine, dear. Go to your father, now. Tell him I'll be there shortly." Using a more commanding voice with her daughter, she managed to drive the young girl away, though Hinata looked very hesitant to follow her mother's order. Once the girl disappeared around the corner, the pain on Haruka's face reappeared and she clutched her chest, struggling to breathe. She looked down at the white cloth in her hands and saw it speckled with dark red spots of her own blood. Hinata felt very small in the busy streets of her beloved Konoha. Her sparkling eyes roamed around, adoring the beautiful lamps that illuminated the village. Every stand had their own specialty, focusing the attention of various passers-by. Lively music echoed throughout, accompanied by the joy and laughter of everyone Hinata saw. It gave her a soothing feeling in her chest unlike anything else she had experienced up until this point in her life. What she was witnessing right now was far different from the atmosphere at home, which to her had always been a rather gloomy and inhospitable place. In her 4 years of age, soon to be 5, the only person she had ever seen smiling and laughing was her own mother. No one else in the household ever smiled at her, especially her father, which was why she wondered if he was happy to have her as a daughter at all. They had been walking through the streets for almost 10 minutes now. Hiyashi leading the way as Haruka walked a few yards back from him. A respectable distance a noblewoman offers to her honorable husband. Following along behind her was Hinata and her bodyguard Ko, along with a couple more Hyuga guards who were tasked with watching over the main branch, ensuring their safety in the crowded streets. Hinata continued to look around, wanting to stop at one of the stands that interested her, but she knew her father wouldn't let her. All of a sudden, the attention they were receiving from the villagers grew when they heard a popping sound from somewhere behind them, followed by an angry growl and fits of laughter. "You should have seen yourself, Mr. Tahahahahah." The loud voice carried over the crowd. It wasn't difficult to find the source, since the boy responsible was holding from laughing so hard and pointing a finger accusingly at the rearmost Hyuga guarding them. Hinata's eyes widened when she looked back and saw one of the Hyuga guards dripping wet. In one palm he held an irregular-shaped piece of red rubber, which at one time might have taken the shape of a balloon before bursting atop someone's head. The Hyuga heiress brought her hand to her lips in an effort to contain her laughter. Her eyes traveled back to the source of the prank, and it became harder for her to resist giggling loudly because his laughter was so infectious. He had blonde hair, blue eyes, and whiskered cheeks. He somehow looked familiar to her. Unfortunately, it seemed that only she and the blonde boy found the prank funny. The Hyuga who had been the recipient of the water balloon decided to teach the kid a lesson. Before the boy could get away, the Hyuga guard caught him by his shirt and lifted him in the air like a sack of potatoes. "Oi, let go of me, mister," the boy protested as he uselessly flailed about. "You'll pay for what you've done, you little brat." The guard snapped in his face. The humor Hinata had been enjoying disappeared completely with the quick turn of events. She was now fraught with worry for the boy, as she watched the guard reprimand him loudly. She knew that no matter what, this would not turn out well. Suddenly, it seemed as if all the attention of the festival had turned upon them, and she heard whispers coming from the villagers surrounding them. "That's the fox kid," one of them said. "Yeah, he's got guts playing pranks on the Hyuga. He's dead meat," another whispered. The smiles Hinata had seen on the faces of the villagers had vanished, now replaced with smug looks and disgusted stares. They continued to mutter, demeaning him at every turn, and Hinata felt nothing but pity for the boy trapped in the Hyuga guard's grasp. The murmurs ceased only after the head of the Hyuga clan interrupted. His eyes stared coldly at the boy and as usual, his cold demeanor expressed no emotions, neither disgust nor irritation. There was nothing. Although if one looked closely enough it was clear he felt some apathy towards the boy. "Let him go," Hiyashi commanded firmly at the guard, narrowing his eyes at the blonde child. "It is beneath us to become involved with a monster." The guard dropped him instantly and bowed apologetically at his leader. The boy he just dropped was now sitting on the ground, rubbing his backside as he grimaced in pain. After a few seconds he stopped and glared daggers at the man standing over him, unshed tears forming at the corner of his sapphire blue eyes. He wiped them away with his sleeve. Hiyashi stared icily at the boy, showing neither pity nor mercy regarding his current state. He refused to run the risk of being associated with the vessel of the nine-tailed fox, especially since the boy was the same age as his daughter. He wanted to ensure that she never came near him again, whether it was in the academy or anywhere else in the village. "Leave," he said harshly to the boy, before turning away to proceed down the street. With everyone's attention focused on him, the boy took off, sprinting in the opposite direction, not looking back so he wouldn't have to see the heartless stares he was getting from the villagers. The boy deserved it. He shouldn't be allowed at the festival in the first place. All he did was ruin the fun. He'll never be part of this village. Ever. He's a monster who needs to vanish for good. When the boy was finally out of everyone's sight, the atmosphere became lively once again and they all chose to forget about how the boy disrupted the festivities. However, unbeknownst to the boy who thought all he would ever receive from the villagers were heartless glares, a Hyuga maiden stood frozen on the spot, watching him run away from the light of the festival. Hinata's heart ached for the boy. She remembered him now. He was the monster that all of the villagers kept talking about. He was the kid who liked playing pranks on unsuspecting passers-by. He was the kid who was constantly bullied by the other children in the village. She remembered his name, it was Uzumaki Naruto. Her curiosity piqued, as she absently wondered why the villagers called him a monster and despised him, despite his cheerful and friendly personality. Don't wander off too far, understand? Haruka reminded her daughter as she affixed the ornamental hairpin into the child's indigo hair. Hinata nodded in understanding. They had just left the Hokage's office right after she had been introduced to the Hokage. However, she could not stay any longer since the Sandaime had summoned her parents for an important and very private meeting. It was the very first time she had met the leader of the village and she really liked the Sandaime a lot. He seemed kind and gentle. Even as shy as she was, she felt very comfortable in the Hokage's presence. "Please take care of her, Ko," Haruka said, addressing the bodyguard standing behind the heiress. "I promise to watch her carefully, Haruka-sama," Ko automatically replied. Haruka planted a kiss on Hinata's cheek and smiled. "Go have fun." And then she turned and walked back into the Hokage's office to rejoin her husband. Hinata and Ko returned to the lively streets of the village. The young heiress was eagerly strolling along with her loyal bodyguard, carefully watching her small figure. It was her first festival, which, as far as she knew, celebrated the sacrifice of the first Hokage's wife for the sake of the village. Hinata didn't know the rest of the story, but apparently the whole village owed this woman a great debt. Her steps halted when she saw a flash of yellow from the corner of her eye. It was Naruto. Her feet suddenly wanted to pull her towards his direction before she lost sight of him. But by the way her father and the guards reacted earlier, it seemed they didn't want her anywhere near him. Ko was also with her, so she might not get the chance to chase after him. "Is there something wrong, Hinata-sama?" Ko asked, recognizing her sudden change in behavior. Hinata wondered if she could, or even should try to escape from Ko. She may not have the chance now, but that didn't mean she couldn't try when she did. The truth is, I'd like to try that," Hinata said, pointing at a takoyaki stand with a long line in front of it. Nodding to his charge, they made their way over to the stand, and as luck would have it, an old woman bumped into Ko and the basket full of fruits she was carrying fell to the ground. Momentarily distracted from his duty as her bodyguard, Ko bent down to help the old woman gather her fruit, providing Hinata with the chance to escape. Taking advantage of her small build, she dissolved into the crowd and immediately tried searching for the blonde-haired boy who captured her attention. Somehow, she managed to put some distance between her and Ko, but with his Byakugan, 5 minutes was the maximum amount of time she'd have before he'd find her. The crowd seemed to swallow her, but it didn't keep her from spotting the distinct blonde hair of the boy again. It was clear he was leaving the festival, and she decided to chase him down before Ko found her. While she was following him, she accidentally bumped into someone due to her being distracted. "I'm sorry," she promptly said with a quick bow. When she lifted her head, she saw familiar eyes of a Hyuga that belonged to someone she had never met before. The boy was staring curiously back at her, but Hinata chose instead to turn away and continue chasing after Naruto before she lost sight of him. As Hinata wove her way through the crowd, she failed to hear the words the boy muttered as he watched her leave. "Was that Hinata-sama?" Naruto threw another shuriken at the trunk of the tree, and as usual it missed its target, much to his dismay, and joined everything else he'd thrown in a pile on the ground. With nothing left in his hands to throw, he had no choice but to pick them up and start all over again. A depressed look was pasted on his boyish face as he gravely made his way over to gather up his ninja tools. One by one, he picked them up. Even though he was at the training grounds, he could still hear the liveliness of the festival, and the sounds depressed him more than ever. They kicked him out again from a celebration in his own village. They loathed his presence. They wanted him to vanish. The only thing Naruto could do was to bear the brunt of what they said, even though it hurt terribly. He thought about it all the time. He wondered why people despised him like they did. Why they wanted him gone. Why couldn't he grow up normally like other kids? With parents, with friends, with people to accept him. Why did everyone treat him like a monster? It is beneath us to become involved with a monster. The man's voice echoed in his head. In his mind, he could clearly see those apathetic eyes glaring coldly down at him. He didn't know who the man was, but it didn't matter because he could tell he was just like all the others. The man hated him and wished he was gone. Suddenly, a teardrop rolled down his whiskered cheek, and then another one, followed by a third. Soon, he was trying his hardest to keep himself from crying uncontrollably. He just knelt there as he finished gathering his shuriken back into his pouch, the tears silently flowing down his whiskered face. As he cried, he unexpectedly heard light footsteps and he turned to see who it was. Ignoring the tears streaming down his face, he glared at his unfamiliar visitor. Pale lavender eyes, indigo hair, fair skin. He noticed she has the same eyes as the man who glared coldly at him earlier, but this time instead of an icy chill, he felt nothing but warmth and concern. You're crying? Hinata said in a soft, shy voice. She blushed when his blue eyes met hers. Naruto immediately wiped the tears from his eyes with his sleeve. I am not crying. Boys don't cry, he shouted defensively. But, just now I saw you, she said softly, but it was fair enough for Naruto to hear her voice. The boy sniffed and shook his head. I said I'm not. I just got some dust in my eyes, that's all. He glared at the girl in front of him. Why, you shouldn't be here. You're all dressed up for the festival, so it's a waste of time for you not to be there and enjoy it. The girl fidgeted and shyly played with her fingers. I saw you earlier. You threw a water balloon at one of the Hyuga guards. My father said something horrible to you and I felt bad. Naruto shot her a surprised look and asked, you felt bad, for me? He blinked his eyes in confusion. No one in the village talked to him, not even his own classmates. The man who stared coldly at him before was this girl's father, so that explained why their eyes looked alike. Hinata nodded her head. You know, my mom told me that if you're sad and feel like crying, why you can stare up the sky to watch the clouds and stars. She said, following her own suggestion and looking up. They'll comfort you, and they'll never hate you for staring at them. I told you I wasn't crying. He yelled at her, tired and irritated that she kept insisting on it. Well, he really was, to be honest, but he wasn't going to admit that to anyone, especially a girl. And why are you red all of a sudden? You're stuttering too. Hinata ducked her head and hid her eyes beneath her thick bangs. She was never good at talking with other people, let alone to a stranger. She could barely talk with her father properly. Somewhere deep inside Naruto, he felt happy. He never thought that anyone would talk to him like this. She wasn't disgusted by him, didn't hate him, and instead, she seemed to be genuinely concerned for him. Out of everyone he'd met in the village, she was the only one who looked at him that way. He introduced himself with a confident grin and said, I'm Uzumaki Naruto. His sad face and feelings now gone. Who are you? Hinata's throat went dry. She knew him since they went to the same class in the academy, but he did not know her at all. She never thought that introducing herself to someone could be so hard. This was the first time she'd ever talked to someone outside of her own family and the clan. She didn't know why her feet pulled her towards him at the festival, or why she followed him out here to the training grounds, or why she approached him when she saw him on his knees crying. All she knew for certain was that she felt bad for Naruto. My name, she stuttered, struggling to get out the words. It seemed harder to talk than before. Why was it so hard just to say her name? Before she could finish, a voice interrupted her and shouted, Hinata-sama. They both turned in the direction of the voice and saw a boy who appeared to be a year older than they were. He had the same eyes as Hinata. Hinata stared at the boy in confusion. He marched angrily towards them, and then watched as he suddenly pushed Naruto away from the Hyuga heiress, causing him to fall on the ground. Get away from her, you monster! The boy shouted as he stood protectively in front of the girl. What do you think are you doing with Hinata-sama? Who the heck are you? Naruto spat back at him before standing up. There's no reason for you to know. Our clan doesn't want to be associated with someone like you. The Hyuga said sharply, before turning around to address the girl behind him. His expression softened and he asked, Are you hurt, Hinata-sama? Hinata shook her head. Why, you got it wrong. Naruto-kun is not hurting me, we were just talking. She replied. She couldn't remember seeing him before, but his facial features reminded her of both her father and her uncle, Hisashi. Then realization struck and she knew who he was. He was her cousin, Neji Hyuga. Let's get you back to Ko. I'm sure he's worried about you, Neji said, taking her small hand and leading her away from the fox kid. He shot Naruto one last glare and growled, Don't come near my cousin again, monster. The words were different from what Naruto had heard from the man earlier, but the cold and loathing tone was still there. Those eyes glared at him hard, seeing him only as a monster trying to hurt the little girl named Hinata. His newfound happiness that had been slowly creeping in his chest was cut short when those venomous words filled his ears. Naruto wanted to punch the guy in the face, but something, he didn't know what, held him back from doing so. Naruto watched the pale-eyed boy forcefully drag Hinata away. The girl seemed hesitant to leave, but there was nothing she could do to get away from her cousin's grip. The only thing she could do was look back at Naruto and mutter a soft goodbye. The Hyuga family did not linger at the festival as soon as the discussion with the Hokage finished. Ko confessed that he lost sight of Hinata for a brief moment, but when he found her, she was already with her elder cousin, Neji. Hiyashi was furious at the guard at first, but Haruka managed to calm him down since nothing bad happened to their daughter. The children kept to themselves that Hinata was found having a conversation with the monster kid that everybody seemed to hate, and Hinata was relieved that her father didn't press too much in asking what really happened. Hinata had already changed out of her formal kimono and back to her simple juban, intending to tuck herself into bed. But she chose instead to stay on her porch, overlooking her private garden as she stared at the cloudless night sky. The festivities outside her home still continued, and she could not help but wonder what Naruto was doing at a time like this. The villagers clearly did not want him back at the festival, and it appeared the feeling was mutual, as he had no desire to return either. She thought it must be really hard for him to deal with this kind of situation, and she wondered if he was staring up the stars seeking comfort, just like she had told him. She saw him cry, probably because of all those terrible things her father and the villagers said about him. At the academy, he was always so goofy and lively. He liked playing pranks on different people. He was always laughing, so seeing him cry made her sad. "Dear, it's time to go to bed," her mother said gently, as she approached Hinata, who seemed lost staring at the beauty of the night sky. Hinata tore her gaze away from the stars and looked curiously at her mother. "Okawa-sama, the boy we saw earlier. Why does everyone despise him?" Haruka's eyes widened a bit in surprise, as she was taken aback by her daughter's question. "I know him, mother," Hinata continued, rushing to get the words out. "He goes to the same class as I do. But why is everyone so angry at him? Father even called him a monster." The sadness in Hinata's voice was obvious, and Haruka knew all too well that her kind, gentle daughter felt pity for the boy. Haruka felt pity for the boy as well, but he was dangerous and she couldn't risk him being near her daughter. "I'm sorry, dear. I can't answer that question," Haruka said sadly. "Our village implemented a law that says we cannot speak about the child's identity. And you are still too young to understand matters like that." She picked the small girl up in her arms and began walking towards her bedroom. "Why, mother? Is he a bad person?" Hinata asked insistently. "I saw him, he was crying. I felt really sad that father treated him that way." "Your father has his own reasons, dear. Someday, you'll understand why things are the way they are." Hinata remained silent after hearing her mother's words. She kept her own questions to herself, hoping that someday they would be answered, and everything would become clear. As she did every night, Haruka tucked her daughter into bed and sang her a lullaby until Hinata fell asleep. But tonight, one lullaby wouldn't be enough to get Hinata to sleep because of her thoughts were about Uzumaki Naruto. She wanted to know more about him. She felt his sadness and wanted to become his friend, so that he knew someone cared about him. She too didn't have friends at school because of her shyness, and her classmates were too intimidated to interact with her because of her family's reputation in the village. It was an achievement for her that she got to talk with someone her age at all. She couldn't wait to see him again. Both he and Hinata went to the same class at the academy, so there was a high probability that they would see each other every day. They were both in the same group, so they would graduate and become genin when the time came. Her mother was right. She would probably understand things better when they grow up. She was the heiress of the Hyuga clan after all, and she was expected to give her loyalty and devotion to her clan and village. She would have quite a bit of time training to become a kunoichi for Konoha someday. She had a long journey before her. She vowed she would grow strong, together with Naruto and the rest of her classmates. Little did she know how wrong she was. It was Hinata's 5th birthday, and she'd been looking forward to this day ever since her mother told her that she'd be meeting Neji again. They'd first met at the festival when she chased after Naruto, and from that day on, she was eager to see him once more because he'd been the first person in the clan who smiled at her aside from her mother. But instead of a normal birthday celebration, tradition demanded that the main family demonstrate the progress of the Hyuga heir to the head of the branch family. Suffice to say, the Hyuga heiress was not performing well. "Stand up, Hinata," Hiyashi commanded firmly, his eyes cold and unyielding as he observed his daughter's crouched figure. His look was haughty, and he'd crossed his arms in front of his chest as he stared the girl down. Hinata struggled to her feet, beads of sweat trickling down her forehead. There were numerous bruises on her exposed arms, and it was clear that she had exhausted herself from her training session prior to this. She tried her hardest to ignore the stinging pain and assume a fighting stance, but it was to no avail. Her body was shaking and she didn't have the strength to raise her head and look at her father. Not that she had the want or courage to do so anyway. No, if she stared at him she'd only see the disappointment and anger in his eyes again, as she'd seen too many times before. She couldn't count the number of times she'd wanted to change this look and see something different, something softer. Unbeknownst the Hyuga princess, a pair of sympathetic eyes observed her every move. Seated at the edge of the training hall were Neji and the head of the branch family, Hisashi. However, unlike the icy stare of Hisashi witnessing her low performance, Neji continued to watch her in a curious, determined kind of way. There was no pity in his gaze, nor hate or criticism for her lack of performance. Only one thing was running through his mind, and it was a feeling he would never get rid of for the rest of his life. Hyuga Neji wished to protect her no matter what the cost. Not only because it was his duty as part of the branch family, but because he cared deeply for his cousin. He didn't look at her simply as the heiress to the Hyuga clan, he looked at her as an important part of his family. "I'll protect her with my life, Otou-sama," Neji stated fervently to his father, never breaking his gaze from Hinata. Hisashi shot him an urgent look, but the boy failed to notice this, as well as the sadness in his father's eyes. His son was a prodigy, yet his fate had already been predetermined since the age of 3, when the caged bird seal was placed on his forehead. His son, who held more talent and promise than anyone else in the entire clan, could aspire to be nothing more than a servant tasked with protecting the lives of the main family at the cost of his own. The thought enraged Hisashi. The next thing they knew Hisashi was on the ground, writhing in excruciating pain. "Father!" Neji shouted. Fear, shock, and confusion were written on his face. "What's happening, father?" Tears formed at the edge of his eyes, as he helplessly watched Hisashi grab his head in agony. The bandage around his father's forehead fell, revealing the caged bird seal, which was now throbbing an angry red on his flesh. Neji's eyes widened at seeing this and he gave a pained look towards Hisashi who was standing protectively in front of his daughter, glaring at the line of seated branch members. "That is your punishment for thinking of harming my daughter, Hisashi," he said coldly to his twin brother, who was struggling to sit up. "Know your place. If I ever see that look upon your face again, I will not hesitate to kill you." He glared arrogantly at his daughter, confident in his position of authority. "Our business is finished here. Let's go, Hinata." The Hyuga leader began to walk proudly out of the training hall, but his daughter stayed rooted in place. It was obvious to all that she wanted to help Neji and Hisashi. "En Neji ni-san," she spoke softly, in a voice barely above a whisper. She took a step towards them, before her father firmly called for her again. "I said let's go, Hinata." Hisashi grabbed his daughter's wrist and dragged her forcefully out of the training room. Hinata was hesitant to leave but she could do nothing but comply with her father's orders. With a heavy heart, she left her cousin Neji crying over the pain his father was going through. It was late afternoon when Hinata finally found herself alone in the Hyuga compound. Her mother and father had an important meeting to attend and she saw this as a chance to look for her cousin. Her heart still ached when she remembered the scene that had played out earlier when she saw Neji cry, and she knew she'd never feel better unless she saw him smile at her again. Today was her birthday and even though she wished for her own happiness, the happiness of those she loved meant more than her own personal wishes. She walked quietly down the hallways of the branch family estate and as always, those she saw shot her nothing but apathetic looks. She politely waved off any attention she gained from the servants and the guards. All she cared about right now was finding Neji. After a few minutes of searching, she found him at the branch family private training ground, practicing the gentle fist all by himself. Fortunately, there were no other branch family members lurking about, giving a small amount of comfort to the heiress. For a few moments she hid behind a pillar, watching his graceful moves and stances. Unlike her, he was effortless and flawless and she couldn't agree more with him being recognized as a true prodigy. Even though as daughter of the clan head, the title was expected to belong to her. She knew all too well that her abilities were far from those of a genius, and instead of making her father proud, all she had given him was disappointment and shame. Hinata swallowed those painful feelings for now. Today, in this moment, it wasn't about the relationship she had with her father, it was about Neji and Hisashi. Gathering her confidence, she stepped into the clearing and called out for her cousin. "Neji ni-san," she said caringly, hoping to gain his attention. Neji stopped his katas and turned, devoting his full attention to whoever had interrupted him. His brows knit upon seeing it was the Hyuga heiress. "What are you doing here?" he asked in a slightly annoyed tone. After what had happened to his father earlier, he wasn't interested in seeing anyone from the main branch at the moment. Hinata looked down at her feet and started fidgeting. "How's Hisashi Ojii-sama?" she asked, loud enough for only for him to hear. Neji narrowed his eyes at the meek girl. "My mother is taking care of father, but he's still in some pain." His gaze hardened at reminding himself of this. "There's nothing you can do to help him, so just leave. The last thing anyone in my family needs from you is your pity." Hinata's eyes remained fixated on the ground, and she was doing her best to prevent herself from breaking down. She may be young, but she was no fool. She knew her father was the reason why Hisashi was in the state he was. Her father was only trying to protect her from Hisashi's intentions, but there were other ways he could have gone about it, rather than causing unwanted conflict between their families. She was well aware that because of her poor abilities, she was unworthy to become the heiress and be protected by such a prestigious clan. After all, she was nothing but a disgrace to her family. "I'm sorry, Neji ni-san. I didn't want this to happen to uncle," Hinata said in a shaky voice. "Just go back to your house. No one wants you here anyway," Neji said harshly, unwilling to acknowledge her sincere apology. "And besides, you're disrupting my training." Hinata could feel the increasing pain in her chest. She gripped the hem of her shirt tightly, biting her lip in an attempt to prevent herself from crying, but her efforts were wasted when tears started to roll down her cheeks. "I'm really sorry." She immediately bowed to hide her face. Her hand quickly wiped away the tears and she turned to leave. The anger on Neji's face dissolved and was immediately replaced by guilt. He'd never intended to make her cry, he just didn't want to see anyone right now, since he knew all they would give him was pity and insincere worry about his father. His eyes trailed after her departing figure as she disappeared into the hallways of the estate, and realization over what he had done kicked his brain hard. Hinata purposely came to see him in the branch family estate. She was the heiress of the clan, which meant she was not allowed to leave the main estate without her father, mother or personal guardian. Most clan members weren't very fond of her, mainly because of how weak she performed. She was basically all alone, forced to live in a place where most everyone despised her. Neji broke into a sprint, chasing after the younger girl. "Spoiled brat. What's she doing here? Her family is responsible for nothing but pain. She should leave before Hisashi shows up and harms someone else." Hinata tried to ignore the venomous whispers as she walked by the hallways, but it simply wasn't possible because they echoed all around her. She kept her head down and face hidden from everyone that saw her, but she was unable to hide the fact that she was crying. She looks so weak and frail. She hasn't given anything for Hisashi-sama to be proud of. The air felt heavy and oppressive, like it was suffocating her. Their sharp words entered her ears no matter how hard she tried to ignore them. It made the pain in her chest double, and brought more tears to her eyes, which she fruitlessly tried to hide beneath her thick indigo bangs. Without her father, she was just nothing but useless. There was nothing of value she could give to her clan. She bit her lower lip and sniffed. Their eyes were burning into her back, and she didn't know how much longer she could take their hated stares. She felt so small, so weak, and instead of anger building up her chest, it was fear that conquered her. "When will I be accepted?" Hinata thought to herself, blinking back her tears. "Why did I have to be born a failure? Will I ever be able to change?" Suddenly, a hand firmly gripped her wrist and dragged her away, saving her from her thoughts of misery and shame. Finding the courage to lift her head up, she saw that it was Neji who came for her. For some reason, she felt the pressure in her chest lessen at his mere presence. Ignoring the hard stares he received from the other branch family members, Neji protectively led her out of the branch family household and returned her to the main house. When they finally arrived back at the main house, Neji released her hand and faced the shy girl. She was still sniffling and trying to stifle her sobs, but he could tell that once he left her alone, she'd break down once again. Her fragile look and delicate demeanor were characteristics he'd never seen portrayed by anyone else in the clan. That difference was the main reason why he decided to protect her, from the very first time he saw her at the festival. "I am so sorry for the trouble, Neji-ni-san." Hinata sobbed, wiping away her tears, only for fresh ones to flow down her cheeks. She just couldn't stop crying. Neji felt bad for his behavior just a few minutes earlier. He hadn't meant anything he said to her, and he appreciated that she risked her father's wrath for coming to the branch house unattended in order to see how his father was doing after the incident this morning. "Next time, please don't come to the branch house on your own," Neji said with concern. "If you're caught, you'll get into serious trouble, and neither of us wants that." "I'm sorry," Hinata said. Neji groaned inwardly. How many times does she think she has to apologize? He got the point the first time she said it, and it brought another pang of guilt every time she continued to bring it up. "Stop apologizing," he said, flustered as he rubbed his forehead in slight annoyance. "I'm the one who should be sorry, Hinata-sama. I apologize for my behavior earlier. I didn't mean to make you cry. I'm the one who should be protecting you, not the other way around," he thought to himself. But Hinata, being the kind-hearted person she was, didn't hesitate to accept his apology. Actually, as far as she was concerned, Neji didn't have to apologize at all. It was completely understandable for him to act the way he did, considering it was his father who got hurt, and it was her father who caused it. It's fine, Neji-ni-san. You have nothing to apologize for. I understand." Trying to avoid looking at her innocent face, mainly so he didn't have to deal with a fresh round of guilt, Neji dipped his hand into his pocket and pulled out an elaborately wrapped small box. "Because of circumstances, I wasn't able to give this to you earlier. It's a birthday present." "Wait, did he just stutter?" Hinata took the box he offered and undid the bow that was wrapped around it. She opened the box and gasped before pulling out an intricately carved golden hair ornament. As her fingers traced over the aesthetic design of the azalea and nadeshiko flowers carved into the top, the sadness left her eyes and she smiled brightly. "Thank you so much for the present," she said earnestly, embracing her cousin warmly despite her shy demeanor. The hug lasted for a few seconds, but when she pulled away from her cousin, Neji couldn't hide the blush of embarrassment on his cheeks or the shock on his face. Before Neji continued to make a fool out of himself in front of the Hyuga princess, he bowed quickly. "If you'll please excuse me, Hinata-sama." And then he turned to leave, and was gone in a flash. He still found it hard to believe that he had such an innocent, caring cousin despite how cold and rigid the rest of his clan acted. She truly was a diamond in the rough. 3 days later. Hinata was more depressed than ever. Once again, she'd failed a chakra control test at the academy, and once again, everyone made negative comments about her, comparing her to the genius prodigy of her clan Neji, who once again topped his class with high grades in both the written and physical exams. Hinata scored high in her written exams, but of course that wasn't enough to live up to the expectations of her clan, especially those of her father. She needed to develop her strength and skills in addition to her intelligence. Anything less was unacceptable for a Hyuga, especially the heir. And as her father reminded her on a constant basis, there had never been a weak Hyuga. But if there had been, they wouldn't have been a Hyuga for very long. And based on her performance, both at the academy and during her private training sessions, she'd never done anything to merit the title of heir to the Hyuga clan. Because as she'd done so many times before, she'd failed. And failure was not an option to those who would judge her worthiness as both a princess and a Hyuga. Lost in her thoughts of self-depreciation, Hinata plodded along the hallways of the academy on her way to the front gate where her guardian Ko would be waiting for her. However, just before she exited the academy, she saw a flash of blonde hair that she knew distinctly belonged to the one person who'd become her source of strength for quite some time now. Not hesitating for a moment, she decided to follow the boy to wherever he was headed, staying a safe distance away so she wouldn't be spotted. Naruto reached the back of the academy, oblivious to the presence of the lavender-eyed princess following him. Hinata stayed what she felt was an acceptable distance behind him, hiding secretly behind a wall when he made it to his destination in order to watch what he was up to. She knew that Naruto failed the test as well. Actually, he'd failed both the written and the physical tests, which is why everyone called him the dead last. Still, she was amazed at the determination in Naruto's eyes, and every afternoon she would see him sneak off and train in order to improve his abilities. I'll show them. I'll show everyone that I can be a strong ninja. Naruto started with his shuriken training, trying to hit both moving and stationary targets. Hinata could see that he was making progress compared to the first time she'd seen him sneak away and train, because he could now hit a few targets rather than none, but his precision and accuracy were still far below the class average. Hinata pressed her body against the wall in an effort to remain unnoticed, so that she could continue to watch him. He was the main reason why she started doing better in her training sessions. Whenever she was on the verge of giving up, when she felt like she'd reached her limit and couldn't go on, she remembered his determination and perseverance, and it gave her the strength and confidence to do better. She would work hard, just like him, and become the strong, confident leader of her clan someday. There you are, Hinata-sama. She jumped at the sudden voice behind her. She spun around and saw that it was her bodyguard, Ko-san. How long have you been there? Hinata grew an even lighter shade of pale at the thought of her bodyguard catching her watching Naruto again, when she had been specifically forbidden to do so. You've been watching him again, Hinata-sama. Ko said in a slightly reprimanding tone. Your father would be furious if he knew of this. You shouldn't be interacting with him outside of your academy classes, and it would be best if we left now. He reached for the small girl's hand to lead her away. But why, Ko-san? Why does everyone avoid Naruto-kun? Hinata asked curiously. He's a good friend to me, and he's so much fun to be around. Ko looked at her sympathetically, thinking it would be nice if she had a true friend. It's too bad she had to take an interest in the one boy who could never be seen as anything but a monster. You're still too young to understand, Hinata-sama. But I reiterate that for your own good, you should refrain from socializing with him outside of class. He pulled her away from the training grounds. Now, let's go. Hiyashi-sama expects you back at the house as soon as possible. The elders would like to see how far you've progressed in your training, and they've requested that you spar with Neji-sama. Hinata panicked, her face overcome with fear. This day could only end badly. The only thing left to be determined was just how bad it would be. That is enough for today, Hiyashi stated firmly, as he stood up from the zabuton beside the Hyuga elders. His face an impassive mask, he looked at Neji and declared, You've done well, Neji. Your progress with the gentle fist is nothing short of impressive. You are dismissed. Despite what had happened between Hiyashi and his father just days earlier, he took his uncle's words to heart. Thank you, Hiyashi-sama, Neji said, bowing deeply. Hiyashi then turned to his daughter, who was kneeling on the ground panting with exhaustion. The look of disgust on his face was readily apparent. Get out of my sight. He coldly spat at her, I don't want to see your face. Hinata had feared this would happen. The fight against her cousin had been one-sided right from the start. Her footwork was sloppy, her stance was poor and ungraceful, she was slow with her attacks and her defense was full of holes. Any attempt she'd made at fighting had been utterly useless, and once again, she brought nothing but shame and disappointment to her father, and the Hyuga name. The elders, who were basically her own grandparents, stared at her like she was a piece of trash that should be discarded at the earliest opportunity. They stood, glaring icily down at her as she made a half-hearted attempt to stand. You're a pathetic failure, as both the heiress and a Hyuga, her grandmother said before heading out of the training room. Her grandfather stood and followed behind her, not bothering to say anything or spare her another glance. Unlike the elders, Hiyashi spared his daughter one final glance before following them out of the room. His apathetic look further weakened her already low self-esteem, causing tears to immediately build up in her eyes. Her tiny hands balled into fists, clenching the edge of her shirt in an attempt to suppress those feelings, but the effort was clearly in vain as the tears began to drop steadily on the wooden floor. Her body trembled under the weight of her emotions, the pain too much to bear. As far back as she could remember, her father had only looked at her with derision and disappointment. His manner towards her had always been cold and strict, as if he was somehow unable to show caring of love for her. He'd never praised her, appreciated any effort she made for him, or even smiled at her. Not once. Hinata-sama. She was so focused on the hurtful words that had been said, as well as the gamut of painful emotions permeating her heart, that she failed to notice the concerned voice of her opponent. Worried about his cousin, Neji had stayed behind to make sure she was fine, But it shocked him to see Hinata in such a state, unable to hold back her tears. Why was I born weak? Hinata thought, sniffling as more tears stained her cheeks, ending up on the floor with the rest. Her innocent face was flushed, her lower lip trembled. Will I ever make father proud? But then his voice echoed through her head, reinforcing her painful feelings. Get out of my sight. I don't want to see your face. Hinata wearily stood up and ran out of the training room as fast as her body would allow. This place was suffocating her. The coldness of the walls, the presence of the elders lingering far beyond their departure from the room. Living in this house was a constant reminder of her failures, and she needed to get away from it all. Hinata-sama, Neji shouted. It was no use, Hinata hadn't heard his concerned voice, and she was gone before he could make a move towards her in an effort to comfort her. Hinata ran without direction or purpose, not caring where she ended up, just so long as it wasn't this place. Naruto Uzumaki was without a doubt exhausted right now. He'd trained the entire afternoon at the training grounds behind the academy, working extra hard in order to make up for his failed tests. It was a constant sore spot with him that he was the dead last in his class, but even though he'd failed so far, it didn't mean he couldn't ace those tests in the future. He knew he had the potential to be a great ninja, but those paper tests and the little bit of physical stuff they made him do really didn't show off too much of his abilities. He promised himself that in the next exam, everyone would see what he was capable of, especially that Uchiha with the hair shaped like a duck butt. Just because he came from a noble clan, had talent and all the girls swooned all over him didn't make Sasuke better than anyone else. The next time we do sparring matches, I'm totally beating the crap out of that guy. Naruto thought angrily. He was heading towards Ichiraku Ramen, like he did every day, hoping to convince old man Tucci to give him a free meal. But at the last minute he decided against it, since the sun was about to set and he wanted to get some more training in. The training grounds at the academy were only available for use until about 5 o'clock, so unfortunately Iruka-sensei had to send him home in order to lock the doors for the night. He'd hoped that Iruka-sensei could go with him to Ichiraku's, but that didn't happen either because the Hokage needed to meet with him. As he came upon his usual training spot, he was surprised to see that somebody else was already there. Naruto frowned, feeling both upset and annoyed. This was the only place where no one bothered him. He wasn't welcome or even allowed in quite a few places in the village, so why was someone taking the one spot where he didn't have to worry about anything? Why couldn't he have a single moment of peace and solitude? He balled his hands into fists and stomped towards the person intruding on what he decided was his personal space. He could see him leaning against one of the posts, curled up and hugging his knees. The boy was shaking, and after a moment Naruto could hear soft sobs escaping as he cried into his chest. Naruto suddenly realized from the tone of her sobs that the person in front of him wasn't a boy. He knew who it was, and the irritation and anger he felt disappeared in an instant, only to be replaced with worry and concern. "Hinata?" he asked tentatively. He heard her gasp in surprise as her head jerked up to meet his gaze. Her eyes were red and swollen, and the sight clenched Naruto's heart in a way he found hard to explain. She'd been the first person to talk to him without hatred, ridicule or scorn. She saw him and a friend and fellow shinobi, not as an inconvenience or academy dead last. He honestly considered the girl as someone important and precious to him because of the kind, gentle words she'd said to him that night of the festival. Those words meant a lot to him, and he swore to himself he'd never forget them, or her. Hinata blushed in embarrassment and shame upon seeing him. Using her sleeve, she wiped the tears from her cheeks. "I am sorry," she muttered softly before starting to rise. She had to get away from Naruto's concerned eyes and penetrating gaze. She couldn't burden someone else with her problems. Sensing that she would escape, Naruto moved quickly and gripped her shoulders, preventing her from doing so. He wasn't going to let her get away as easy as that without telling him why she was so upset. "Why are you crying?" Naruto asked, concerned. For some unknown reason, he felt rage building up inside of him. Hinata shook her head. It's nothing. Don't lie to me, Hinata. I'm not that big of an idiot. Something happened to make you cry like this." "What was it?" Naruto insisted. He moved his hands from her shoulders to grip her arms and she flinched. It was then that he noticed the bruises dotting her arms and the scars lacing her palms. Her lower lip was even split a little. "Who did this to you?" he asked firmly, frowning at the myriad amount of injuries. Hinata lowered her head, hiding her eyes behind her bangs. It's from training, that's all? Naruto didn't believe that for a minute, but he let it slide for now. But that's not the reason why you're crying, right? Naruto pressed her for an answer. Would you tell me why? Her body shook as a fresh round of tears fell from her eyes and she raised her hands, trying to wipe them away. My father sobbed, he hates me, because I'm weak. Another sob. Everyone in my family hates me because I'm a failure. Naruto could feel the trembling in her body getting worse beneath his grasp. He couldn't believe what he just heard. Hinata's family hated her. They hated this sweet, kind, gentle and shy person for being human and caring about other people. She was the kind of person Naruto didn't think existed in this world, but then that night of the festival, she appeared next to him and talked to him with kindness and warmth like he wasn't hated by everyone, like he was normal. It was a moment beyond his imagining. We'll prove them all wrong, Hinata, he said fervently, causing her to look straight into his eyes. You and me, someday, both of us will be so strong that we'll make them realize we're not the failures they think we are. Starting today, we're both gonna train extra hard, and we're gonna make them eat those hateful words they said to you. Hinata could only stare at him with wide eyes, unable to reply because she was stunned speechless. So don't you dare give up, got that? I'm your friend and I'm gonna help you get through this. That's what friends do, right? They help each other out if they need it, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. As he stared ardently into her eyes to show her how serious he was, he couldn't help but notice how beautiful her own eyes were. And was she smiling at him right now? Before she could say anything, he pulled her into a tight hug. I promise you, I'm going to be strong someday, and when I do, I'll become Hokage so that everyone in the village will finally notice me, look up to me and respect me. He hugged her even tighter and finished, and I'll do it especially so that I can protect you, and make sure nobody ever makes you cry again. Naruto-kun? Hinata said, awed and somewhat breathless that he would go so far and make such a bold statement, especially for someone like her. It's my promise of a lifetime, Hinata. And my nindo is that I never break a promise, and never go back on my word. Believe it. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, her arms rose and she returned his embrace, burying her head in his shoulder and hugging him fiercely. And as he felt her tremble and cry against him, he suddenly realized that he didn't want to let her go. Because he had a sinking feeling in his stomach that if he did, she would disappear. But unbeknownst to them both, soon enough, she would. Several days later, Hinata never thought she could feel better after what happened during her training the other day. She had been devastated that her father had refused to talk with her ever since the elders had witnessed her lose the match against Neji. But then Naruto had found her crying and his words had given her courage, strength and new purpose. In the past, she would run and cry to her mother whenever her father demeaned or yelled at her, but now she had the will and desire to change herself and become stronger, and it was all thanks to Naruto. He was the first true friend she had, but being the introverted, shy person she was, it was too embarrassing to publicly admit she was starting to admire and like him. Maybe even beyond that of just a friend. He was always so energetic, outgoing and funny, the complete opposite of who she was. His bright smile always made her heart skip a beat whenever she saw it, and she'd never forget the feeling of comfort as he held her in his arms that day. What made him even more special was his strong determination to fulfill his dreams. Hinata smiled to herself as she worked on her posture for the gentle fist. That day, they'd promised each other that they'd get stronger and prove everybody who doubted them wrong. Hinata promised that she'd become a powerful leader of the Hyuga clan someday, and Naruto swore that he'd become the Hokage of the village. They might still be young, but their dreams were big and they knew it would take hard work and dedication to reach them. And because of Naruto, she realized her dream wasn't out of reach. Before, she thought it was impossible to become head of the clan because she was so weak, but Naruto came into her life and was now the inspiration to fulfill her dreams. So, even though it hurt because her father was constantly disappointed in her, and the elders felt she was pathetic and a failure, and the entire clan still despised her, she promised both to herself and Naruto that one day, everyone would finally be proud of her. Not only as a Hyuga, but also as the heir to the clan and Hiashi's daughter. Her training was disrupted when she heard a loud boom from outside of the Hyuga household, along with lively cheering by some of the villagers. She walked across the training room to where Ko, her loyal bodyguard, was standing and asked curiously, Ko, what's happening outside? Is there a festival happening? Today, Konoha is celebrating the village of Kumogakure offering us a peace treaty. Ko explained briefly to the young heiress. Your parents have both been invited to participate in the celebration, as well as meet the leader of the Kumogakure delegation. Oh, that's why mother and father dressed so formally earlier. Hinata said softly. So, today will be a very special day in the village from now on? Ko nodded. That's right. Not since the time of Hashirama, the Shodai Hokage, has there been such an agreement of peace between us. Little did he know how right he was. This very special day would be one that changed the life of Hyuga Hinata forever. Somewhere in Konoha, 3 caravans were parked alongside one of the private streets in a secluded area of Konoha. Each caravan carried weapons, armor, food and other necessities for the Kumogakure delegation during their 4-day trip to Konoha. The parade had ended over an hour ago, and the Kumo ambassador had sought permission from the Hokage to be left alone for an hour to discuss matters concerning their village, and right now, without anyone from Konoha watching their every move, the Kumogakure ninjas were discussing their true mission within borders of Konoha. We'll invade the compound by night, the leader of the Kumo ninja force said. I see no reason to alter the plan that we discussed back in the village, so we'll proceed with no changes. I'll locate the room of the heiress after the caravan has left Konoha and is traveling to the east. Once I have kidnapped her, I'll meet up with you at the predetermined place on the border of Fire Country and the Land of Hot Springs. The rest of the shinobi under his command nodded. We have discovered that the clan leader's wife is in very poor health. Such a thing will provide an excellent distraction, Kosaku-sama. One of the Kumo ninja said. Kosaku narrowed his eyes. If Hyuga Haruka becomes too much of a hindrance towards accomplishing our objective, don't hesitate to finish her. However, if she remains unknowing to your presence, leave her be. The more discreet we can be with this operation, the better. But if you fail in kidnapping the Hyuga heir, take Hyuga Haruka instead. Her failing health will ensure she'll offer less resistance than any of the other Hyuga we might obtain. Are we clear? The Kumo shinobi snapped to attention and saluted their leader. Yes, sir. Good. Kosaku smirked evilly. This treaty will provide the perfect cover for us to finally obtain a powerful Kekkei Genkai. Unbeknownst to the ninjas from Kumogakure, an Anbu clad in a black cloak was spying on them from the roof of a building nearby. With his genjutsu to keep him virtually invisible to the naked eye, he kept his chakra low and remained very still to make sure he remained unnoticed by the Jonin shinobi. After believing he'd heard everything of importance and that the discussion was over, he quietly disappeared from his hiding spot. The black-cloaked Anbu landed gracefully on the ground before a pale dark-haired man who was seated calmly on a boulder. His long hair was tied in a ponytail, he wore basic Jonin attire, and the Hite 8 around his forehead bore the symbol for Otogakure in the center. The man sitting on the boulder opened his eyes and raised his brows, staring curiously at the Anbu standing before him. Back from your little mission, I see. What did you learn, Kabuto? He inquired. Your hunch was correct, Orochimaru-sama. The Anbu removed his mask and revealed himself to be Orochimaru's henchman, Kabuto Yakushi. He appeared to be in his mid to late teenage years, yet he bore a much more serious expression than someone his age should wear. The Kumo delegation was actually sent here for 2 purposes. The first was the one made public, which is offering a peace treaty to Konoha. The second covert mission was to kidnap the heiress of the prestigious Hyuga clan, in the hopes of using her to obtain a Kekkei Genkai for their village. Orochimaru smirked at Kabuto, clearly amused at the bold actions of the Kumo shinobi. Kidnapping the heir to one of the most powerful clans in order to obtain a powerful Kekkei Genkai, he said mockingly. It's amusing that they believe such a plan might succeed, even more so, since it conflicts with mine and I won't allow such a thing to happen. Kabuto started intently at Orochimaru, believing he knew what his master would decide to do next, but loath to voice his opinion. So what will be our next move, Orochimaru-sama? Orochimaru chuckled dryly. I wouldn't become unnecessarily worried, Kabuto. Their mission will only increase the odds of success for our plan to be completed. They plan to proceed with the attempted kidnapping tonight. Is it still your intention to execute our plan as well, despite the circumstances? Oh yes, Kabuto, we will absolutely proceed. Orochimaru hissed. We will not be postponing our plan, despite the fact that the Kumo Nin have the same mission that we do. I will not allow them to obtain the Byakugan before I do, and this will be a prime opportunity for us to disappear with the heiress. We will let the Kumo Nin do the dirty work, and we will be waiting for a prime opportunity to take the spoils. It was late at night and time had passed quickly from the joyous celebration that had happened in the village earlier. The streets of Konoha, filled to capacity during the daytime, were now peaceful, empty and dark. Similar to the houses of the villagers, the Hyuga compound was quiet and tranquil as well under a dark, moonless sky. The clan members slept in what they thought was relative safety, completely oblivious to the Kumo shinobi roaming undetected throughout their home. Ironically enough, at a time when everyone but the guards patrolling the compound should be fast asleep, Hyuga Haruka was awakened by a painful sensation in her stomach. She jolted out of the futon she shared with her husband and rushed from the bedroom into the bathroom. No, not again. She leaned over the sink and began vomiting again. Earlier that night, after returning from the celebration in the village, she vomited out the dinner she'd eaten, but since her stomach was empty this time, the only thing that came out was blood. As she tried to catch her breath and stop her stomach from heaving, her head snapped up when she heard a faint creak on the wooden floor behind her. Haruka immediately activated her Byakugan and spun around, readying herself in an offensive stance and striking out at her attacker with her Jiyuken. Her attack was accurate, striking a blow directly to the invader's heart and paralyzing all the nerves throughout his body, effectively ending his life. As the man crumpled to the ground unconscious, Haruka felt another stabbing pain in her chest, causing her to fall to her knees and cough out another handful of blood. Her lungs felt like they were on fire. The doctor had given her firm advice to avoid overexerting herself, especially with the Byakugan, because it would only cause her weak condition to accelerate. Unfortunately, before she could call for a servant and alert her husband, another Kumo ninja suddenly appeared, poised to attack. She mentally cursed her weak, physical state. She couldn't move effectively to block her opponent's attacks or even try to escape. Suddenly, she felt a strong chakra presence in the room, one she recognized and was very familiar with, and in an instant, the attacking ninja was lifeless on the ground from the Hyuga clan leader's brutal attack. "Haruka, speak to me," Hiyashi exclaimed, fraught with worry. He knelt down beside his wife and gathered her to his arms. Haruka continued to cough and wheeze from overexerting herself. She was fighting to remain conscious, but her vision was starting to become blurry from lack of oxygen and restricted blood flow to her brain. Her hands shot out, and she managed to tightly clutch her husband's clothing. Gasping for breath, feeling weak and lightheaded, she somehow managed to spurt out, "Hi, Ashi. We need to make sure Hinata is safe." However, by the time Haruka said the words, it was far too late. 30 minutes prior, Kosaku had quietly snuck into the Hyuga compound and rendered the heiress unconscious, then absconded with her as quickly as he came. He remained as invisible as possible, stealth being his primary focus so not to alert anybody to his presence. He knew if he was caught, there would be no way he could explain having the Hyuga heiress in his presence. He wore a thick robe, colored black with a dark mask to hide his identity. The heiress was slung over his shoulder, covered in the same dark cloth as his robe, and for added measure, he had a genjutsu cast around them both. Kosaku continued to move as fast as he dared. He knew the Hyuga clan would notice the heiress was missing and send both the main and branch houses out in force to retrieve her. He shuddered as he thought of what would happen to him if they happened to catch him. They might have even found out about it by now, depending on the success of the man he sent to kill the clan leader's wife, Hyuga Haruka. The man had not met with Kosaku yet, so he could only assume the assassination had failed. Finally making it over the village wall, he landed in the forest and began sprinting as fast as he could towards the east, heading towards the predetermined meeting point on the border of the land of hot springs where the rest of the caravan would be waiting for him. There would be a support unit waiting for them there, providing them with additional support and defense the rest of the way back to Kumogakure. Feeling, Kosaku let out a low snort. By the time they realize what happened, I'll almost be at my destination. The Byakugan is as good as ours. Back at the Hyuga compound, Hiyashi alerted all the clan members, both main and branch alike, that Kumo ninjas had invaded the compound sometime during the night. The personal guard for Hinata, had reported she was nowhere to be found, and the thought devastated the clan members, especially the one standing beside his father, Hisashi. No one had noticed the wife of the clan leader, until Haruka pushed her way through the crowd and urgently grabbed her husband's robe. What do you mean you can't find her anywhere?" she demanded of Hiyashi, her voice full of urgency and desperation. "Haruka, you need to get back to bed," Hiyashi said sternly. "You've exerted yourself too much today, and it's taken a toll on your health." He turned towards one of the branch family members. "Sanako, take my wife back to our chambers. She needs to rest." "Hyuga hiashi." Haruka screamed. It was the very first time that she had raised her voice in front of anyone, other than her husband. She had always been a calm and composed woman, but when it came to the disappearance of her daughter, that was the last straw. "How can you possibly say something like that to me? How can you expect me to remain calm at a time like this? She's our daughter for Kami's sake and she's nowhere to be found." Haruka fisted her husband's robe and yanked his face down to within inches of hers. Tears were building in her eyes, and as she blinked, they flowed freely down her cheeks. "Is it because she hasn't performed up to your expectations that you don't care whether she's found or not? No matter what she's done or hasn't done, Hinata is our daughter and she should be the most precious thing in your life." Hiyashi didn't budge 1 inch in the face of his wife's rage, but the muscles in his jaw clenched. "Sanako, take Haruka back into her room. Now." The branch family member approached her, placing a hand on her arm to lead her away, but Haruka refused, jerking her arm out of Sanako's grip and continuing her verbal assault. "No, you're not dismissing me like I'm an afterthought or some servant that you feel is beneath you. I won't rest until we find her, Hiyashi. My daughter is out there somewhere, taken by those Kumo ninjas who are probably bringing her back to their village to do Kami knows what to her." Haruka yelled hysterically. Her entire body was shaking with anger and fear, and the doctor had told her on several occasions that strong emotions like these weren't good for her health, but right now, she didn't care. She buried her face in Hiyashi's chest and started sobbing, letting her emotions out for everyone to see. "Please, Hiyashi, please, for the love of Kami. We have to find her. We have to find our daughter. She's trying to live up to your expectations. She's doing everything she can to be accepted by you and everyone else in this clan. She's giving everything she has to become an heiress you can be proud of. I don't know if I can live without her in my life." Hiyashi's face was an emotional mask, but on the inside he was reeling, his mind flooded with a tempest of guilty thoughts. How could he have let this happen? How could he let his daughter be kidnapped by Kumogakure ninjas, and from right under the noses of the main family, no less? His knuckles turned white as he clenched his fists at his sides in soundless anger, doing his best to keep his emotions hidden from everyone. He'd been extremely hard on Hinata ever since she started her training on the gentle fist when she was 6 years old. He'd seen the girl try her best, only to hold back her tears when she was coldly berated by both him and his parents, but being the meek girl she was, she couldn't hide her emotions from him and had displayed them, not only for him but for the rest of the clan to see. His disappointment sprung from the fact that he believed she was weak, unlike her cousin Neji, who was a prodigy, wielding the natural-born talents of the Byakugan even though he was a member of the branch family. Never before had he felt so wrong, only when she was gone did he think of her more as a daughter than as an heiress. The shame bubbled up inside his stomach. It was his fault that Hinata had been kidnapped. He should have been more careful. He should have watched over more and protected her better. He should have been more concerned for her welfare. Because right now, he finally understood the worth of Hinata in his life. "We'll find her, Hiyashi," Hizashi said suddenly, as he noticed his twin brother's stone-faced expression. Hiyashi and Haruka both turned to face him. Hiyashi was feeling a bit remorseful, seeing his brother so earnest to help him after what transpired in the training room that day, and Haruka feeling hopeful that even someone who had been hurt by her husband as much as Hizashi had been, still wanted to help rescue her daughter. I became angry that day during training, that Neji would go unnoticed for his talents simply because he was a member of the branch family. It was never my intention to harm her in any way. I simply wished that Neji could be as fortunate as Hinata." Hizashi inclined his head in apology, saddened for the anxiety and pain his brother must be experiencing. "As a branch family member, it is our duty to keep your family safe, and we have failed to protect the heiress." "Hizashi-san." Haruka looked up at him, with pleading and hopeful eyes. "We'll find her," Hizashi stated firmly. "I promise that to both you, Haruka-sama, and to you, brother. She is far too young and innocent to know what to do in a situation such as this, And besides, she is still my niece who brings joy to my only son. I care for her as if she were my own flesh and blood. Then I am counting on both you and the rest of the branch family, brother." Hiyashi said, his eyes radiating with confidence in his younger twin. "While you begin the search, I will inform the Hokage of this kidnapping. Be careful, and I entrust my daughter's life to you." Hizashi nodded affirmatively. "I will bring her back safely, Hiyashi." The search party was set to depart, having quickly suited up for their mission to retrieve the heiress. Hizashi appointed himself leader of the operation, sending out 5 separate groups with 4 members each, one of which was an anbu provided by the Hokage himself. Just as they were about to leave the compound, the voice of a young boy called out to his father. Hiyashi turned to see Neji standing in the doorway, dressed in his combat clothes. "Neji, stay back inside," Hizashi commanded his son. "I'm coming with you. You told me when I was old enough to understand that it's my duty to protect Hinata-sama's life. No matter what the situation, I won't forsake my duty. I'm going to help you look for her," Neji exclaimed fervently. Feeling a swelling of pride in his son, Hizashi knelt down and placed a supportive hand on his small shoulder. "This is one mission you can't come with us on, Neji. I need you to remain here and ensure that the rest of the clan is safe. Your mother, as well as your aunt, will need your strength and support, especially in a time like this." "But what about Hinata-sama? She needs me. She's my cousin, my friend," Neji argued. "Despite your insistence, the answer remains the same. You cannot come, Neji. I order you to remain here with your mother and your aunt," Hizashi firmly said to his son, effectively silencing the boy. "I understand how badly you want to help find your cousin, but considering the skills of those involved, you're far too young and inexperienced to join in the search. I ask that you trust in us, believing that we will do everything in our power to return her home safely, even if it costs me my life. Do you understand what I'm saying? No matter what it takes, we will bring her back to you and her family." Neji stared directly into his father's eyes, realizing how serious he was when he said those words. The boy nodded at Hizashi's pledge, understanding his vehemence. "I trust you, father. I know that you'll be able to save Hinata-sama. I, along with the rest of the clan, will await your return. Please be careful and come back safe." Hizashi smiled warmly, glad to have a son that cared so deeply for not only him, but his cousin as well. He stood up and said, "We'll be back as soon as possible." With barely a sound, the search party disappeared, each group going in their separate directions to search for the heiress. Neji stared at the empty space, which only moments before was crowded with his father and kin, before turning around and striding confidently back into the compound. Despite his desire to be part of the search, his father had forbidden it and given him another task, and his Hyuga honor demanded that he complete it to the best of his ability. And besides, Hinata wouldn't want her to see her mother in such a hysterical state upon her return. She would simply be happy, just being held by the woman who loved her more than anything, and Neji would ensure she remained healthy and safe for when that happened. The sound of rattling greeted her as Hinata woke up, her head feeling oddly heavy and her thoughts foggy. She felt the bizarre motion of what she thought was her bed, and it rocked to and fro until her mind cleared and she realized that she wasn't in her bedroom anymore. Something was tied around her mouth, gagging her so that she couldn't speak, and a rope had been roughly wound around her wrists and ankles to prevent her from moving freely. She cracked her eyes open, waiting for them to adjust to the lack of light, and saw that she was in what appeared to be a wagon. Seated just opposite of her was a man with a scar running crosswise from his left eye down to the corner of his mouth. The inside of the wagon was lit by a small lamp, casting more shadows than light. Hinata's eyes opened wide with fright, and she instantly panicked. Where am I?" she shouted in her mind as she tried to sit up, but the ropes around her prevented any movement. All she could manage was muffled words and screams due to the cloth covering her mouth. The man sitting opposite from her noticed that she was awake. He moved closer and growled, "Keep your voice down, kid." He pulled a kunai out of his pouch and brandished it in front of her face. "We don't want any unnecessary noises that might cause someone to find us, so shut up." Hinata stared at the weapon in horror, scrambling as far away as she could and cringing in a corner of the caravan wagon. "Who are you? Where am I? I want to go home." The words were on her lips, and she tried to scream them out, but all that she could manage were incomprehensible noises because of the cloth covering her mouth. She struggled, trying to break free from the bindings wrapped around her wrists and ankles, but this only caught the attention of the man inside the wagon with her. "I told you to keep quiet, brat," the man hissed harshly, backhanding the girl across her face. Hinata squealed in pain as she collapsed onto the floor. She could feel the tears streaming from her scared eyes, down her swollen cheeks. Her lip had split open from the blow, and a small rivulet of blood trailed down her chin, tainting her pale flesh with a splash of dark red. She trembled in fear as she stared at her kidnapper, afraid that he would continue to beat her mercilessly without thought or regard for her health. Kosaku-sama said not one word, not a single solitary sound out of you. "So shut the hell up or else I'll hit you so hard I'll knock your ass unconscious again. Got that?" the man spat out. Hinata curled up in a ball, hoping to shrink away from the man's hateful and frightening eyes. She didn't know who he was. She'd never seen him before. But whoever he was, he scared her tremendously. All she wanted to do right now was go home to her mother, where she could feel safe in her arms and be held until the fear and the pain went away. "Oi, Yuto, don't be too hard on the girl," Kosaku-sama ordered us not to harm her. A low voice from the outside wafted into the wagon. "Bah, she won't shut up, so I gave her a good smack. I didn't have a choice, but don't worry, I didn't damage her precious eyes." Yuto answered back, obviously upset that someone was questioning his methods of keeping the girl silent. My eyes?" Hinata thought in horror. "What are they going to do to me?" She whimpered, cringing in horror at the possibilities. "Just keep it down, will you?" Yuto growled as quietly as he could at the girl, who flinched away from his harsh glare and tone of voice. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew through the fabric walls of the caravan, extinguishing the lamp which served as the only light source. The inside of the wagon was immediately plunged into pitch black. "What the he?" Yuto didn't get a chance to finish cursing before he heard screams of agony coming from outside the caravan. The wagon had stopped as well, and the sounds coming inside frightened Hinata even more. She could hear the sickening sound of blades meeting flesh and animals rending people apart, and despite her predicament she felt no compulsion to leave the wagon, which she now believed to be safer than what awaited her outside. "Oi, what's happening?" Yuto pushed aside the canvas flap at the back entrance of the wagon to see what was going on outside, and suddenly froze upon seeing his comrades strewn about the clearing. They'd been slaughtered mercilessly, many of them already dead while the rest were bleeding severely from multiple sword wounds. Yuto wasn't a medic, but even he knew that those who weren't dead by now only had minutes left to live. Kosaku saw. Before Yuto could finish calling out for their leader, a venomous hiss came from his right. He spun to defend himself, but he was far too slow to do anything other than bear the full brunt of the attack. 3 snakes whirled out of their wielder's sleeves and latched onto the face and neck of the Kumo ninja, ripping out his eyes and throat. He was dead before his body fell forward and hit the ground with a muted thud. "Too bad your leader was already dead before your feeble attempt to warn him. Or perhaps you were calling for his aid, thinking he might be able to help you?" A man with unusually pale skin and eyes with slits for irises asked, as he chuckled lowly. The sound made Hinata shiver, and sent an icy chill down her spine. After retrieving his snakes, a katana emerged from his right sleeve and he slashed it down, severing the man's head from his shoulders. Blood fountained from the stump, splattering all over the pale-skinned man. Grinning sadistically, an unusually long tongue emerged from his mouth and licked up the droplets that had gotten on his face. Frightened beyond words, Hinata backed away as far as she could within the confines of the wagon. Her whole body was shaking, and whatever color remained in her face had drained, turning her skin a whiter shade of pale. The black-haired man with the yellow eyes had just brutally murdered not only the man who had hurt her, but the rest of the men he'd been traveling with. Hinata might not be experienced in battle, but even she knew that the man standing in front of her was mostly responsible for the carnage laid out around her. She swallowed hard, trying to control the sobs that threatened to escape her mouth, but all she could do was whimper weakly. Her hope to remain unnoticed by the dangerous man shattered like pieces of a mirror when his snake-like eyes turned on her small form with a piercing stare. Her eyes dared around, looking for a way to escape, but the effort was futile. Between the gag on her mouth, the rope tied around her limbs and the confines of the wagon, there was nothing she could do. "I found the girl. Have you assessed the condition of the others, Kabuto?" Suddenly, a man with silver hair in dark cloak appeared and knelt beside him. "Everyone's dead, sir," he reported in a very businesslike fashion. "I've personally taken care of those who were still alive. There's no one left to alert Konoha that we were ever here." Hinata's eyes went wide. Dead? Once again, a sinister chuckle escaped from the man's lips. "Good. Now retrieve the girl, Kabuto. We need to leave before the Hyuga clan catches up to the caravan." "Understood," the man promptly replied. He stood and moved towards the frightened girl who remained crouched and huddled in the corner of the wagon. Scared Hyuga eyes stared at the stranger approaching her. His hands reached out and she flinched in fear, but then unexpectedly, he gently removed the bindings around her wrists and ankles, and then the gag around her mouth. However, the fear she felt permeating her body and the uneasiness at both his and the pale-skinned man's presence never disappeared. "Don't worry, you'll be fine," Kabuto said soothingly. Before the young girl could speak, he placed a hand on her forehead and activated a sleeping jutsu. Hinata could feel her eyelids getting heavy and her head became dizzy. She couldn't fight the feeling of sluggishness that spread throughout her body, and the last thought she had before darkness overtook her was of the bright smile of the boy she'd come to admire greatly. Then she fell into the arms of Kabuto, who scooped her up and quickly left the area with his master, Orochimaru. Being unconscious, she had no idea what kind of life was waiting for her at the end of their journey. But it wouldn't be long before she found that out. Hisashi doubled his speed as his Byakugan finally located the coordinates of those who abducted Hinata. There were 3 caravans, but he immediately sensed something was off because they weren't moving at all. With such precious cargo, they should have been traveling at top speed. He dug his heels deeper into the ground and sped ahead of the rest of his group. "This can't be," Hisashi thought in horror. His Byakugan saw every lifeless body, every slaughtered ninja from Kumogakure that lay sporadically around the covered wagons. When he finally arrived, the first ninja he recognized Aoba Kosaku, the head ninja of the group from Kumogakure. The man, or at least what was left of him, was lying face up, a look of surprise and horror etched upon his bloody face. With only a look, Hisashi knew that the man had suffered from an extreme genjutsu overload, causing his optical nerves to burst. Moments later, Hisashi's companions arrived and stared at the sight in astonishment. Every single Kumogakure ninja were dead. None had survived what could only be termed as a slaughter. "What happened here? An ambush?" one of the Hyuga stated. Another of the Hyuga rescue party began walking around, studying the bodies. Who could have done this? Hisashi checked the other caravans in the possibility that someone might be left alive, but the results were the same. Everyone was dead, either from a horrific genjutsu or torn to shreds by something with exceptionally sharp teeth. And worse, there wasn't one trace of Hinata. Her body was nowhere to be found, but that could either be a positive or negative sign. "Search the area. Spread out," Hisashi firmly commanded, the adrenaline rushing through his veins. This was clearly an ambush, with the frozen looks on the faces of half of the corpses scattered around the clearing. They were taken by surprise, and whoever the culprit was, he had to be extremely powerful to kill so many skilled shinobi. If the kidnappers didn't stand a chance against the unknown assailant, he couldn't imagine what might have happened to his innocent niece. He could only hope that for whatever reason, the assailant had kept her alive and she wasn't dead. She couldn't die, Hisashi tried to convince himself of the seemingly impossible fact. She's the heiress of the clan, and his precious niece. It was his duty to protect the main family at all costs. As long as he lived, it was his duty, and would continue to be his duty, because until he could no longer do so, he'd do anything to find Hinata, and not just because he was a member of the branch family, but because he was her uncle. Hisashi reached the nearby woods, which he sensed had been disturbed by something earlier that night. He continued to follow the path ahead of him where he could sense a person's lingering presence. Soon it led him to a river, where he halted in his tracks and cursed his luck because the trail suddenly stopped. He turned, ready to search the surrounding forest, but before he could begin he spotted a small, familiar piece of fabric. In one swift motion he was kneeling down, saving it from being washed away by the stream, bringing it closer to his eyes for inspection. His chest constricted painfully as he saw what it was. It was the kimono sleeve of his niece, the one with the yin-yang symbol embroidered on it, and it was stained red with blood. He stood up, the piece of clothing clenched tightly in his hands. His Byakugan searched the depths of the river, But then the pain in his chest doubled when his eyes followed the stream several hundred yards to the east, where it ended at a waterfall. The current was too strong, and the height of the falls was far too high for anyone to survive. Hizashi fell down on his knees in defeat and agony, his body numb. His mission to return the heiress, his promise to bring her back safe and sound, had ended in nothing but despair. Dawn passed, and Neji refused to move an inch from his spot. Since his father left to search for Hinata, Neji had been sitting quietly on a bench situated right by the main house's front gate. His eyes were steady as he watched the entrance, eager to welcome the sight of his father and his cousin returning to the compound. All night long he'd waited for the rescue team to return safely with Hinata. He truly wanted to search for the girl. As a branch member, he was assigned to protect her for the rest of his life. And he wasn't devoted to that duty just because of his position in the clan. He wanted to do it also because of personal reasons. So the clan couldn't lose her right now. He couldn't lose her right now. She was one of the few people who constantly made him happy. As the sun began to appear over the horizon, the search team appeared at the gate. Neji sprinted towards his father, eager to see both him and his cousin. "Father," he called loudly. To his shock and amazement, he found his father empty-handed. His face bore a look of guilt, unimaginable sorrow and loss. Neji gulped nervously at the sight. "Father, where is she?" he asked anxiously. The sinking feeling in Neji's stomach began to grow as he looked around at the rest of the search party to see if someone else might be carrying Hinata, but everyone else was empty-handed as well. Crestfallen, Hiyashi looked gravely down at his son, who was staring back at him with fear in his eyes. He tightly clutched the blood-stained piece of Hinata's kimono in his right hand. "I'm sorry, Neji," he said softly to the boy. "What do you mean, father?" Neji asked, swallowing heavily. The lump in his throat refused to go away, no matter how hard he tried. Hiyashi arrived at the front gate, the Hyuga elders trailing behind him. "Hizashi, where is my daughter?" Hizashi walked past his son and stopped in front of Hiyashi, unable to look directly into his eyes from the shame he felt at having failed in his mission. "Forgive me, my brother. My abilities were not enough, and I arrived too late. I wasn't able to make it in time to save Hinata-sama." He extended the piece of blood-stained cloth and offered it to Hiyashi, who took it from his twin brother's hand. Hiyashi's eyes were immediately drawn to the Hyuga family symbol, which had been embroidered on the sleeve of the kimono he now held. As usual, his expression remained impassive so that no one could read his expression, or know what he felt inside. He wore that facade so that no one would see him break. "I demand a full explanation from you, Hizashi," the male elder shouted, coming to stand at the fore. "Stand up." Hizashi obeyed, staring unflinchingly forward and standing his ground firmly. He continued to avoid the gaze of his brother as he narrated what the search team had seen that night. "We found the caravans of the Kumogakure ninjas, and when we arrived there, it was clear there was an ambush because all of them had been slaughtered, some more horrifically than others." Hizashi briefly explained. "We checked every body we came across, but without exception, no one survived the attack. However, Hinata-sama's body was not among them, and wasn't in the surrounding area either. At that point, I instructed our group to expand the area of our search and we spread out, looking for clues." Neji stood behind his father, holding his breath expectantly, but his hands trembled nervously as he heard the report. "I managed to find one of Hinata-sama's kimono sleeves stained with her own blood, and a trail of that same blood led me towards a river. The current was very strong, and not very far downstream was a high waterfall. I searched the river from 1 mile upstream to the brink of the waterfall, but I was unable to locate her body." "Then she's dead," the lady elder said coldly. "The water current was too strong for a child not to be washed away, correct?" Hizashi nodded solemnly, "Yes. And the height of the falls, if she fell, she wouldn't have survived. Survival of this child is incidental." The lady elder spat, irritated that so much concern was being given to someone so worthless. That girl was nothing but a disappointment. She could barely call herself a Hyuga. So the main reason Kumogakure came to our village was to steal the Byakugan. The male elder said, "If the caravans hadn't been ambushed, they would have made it out of Fire County before we caught up with them." Hizashi's head snapped around and fixed the male elder with a piercing stare. He didn't like where this conversation was going. They must pay for this treachery. The lady elder growled. Are you sure the girl is dead? You couldn't find a trace of her body anywhere? She asked Hisashi pointedly. We looked for several hours and widened the area of our search 3 times. We found no trace of her, other than the trail of blood leading to the river and the stained piece of her kimono. Hisashi replied. Then it is safe to assume that she is dead. The lady elder spat harshly, and if that's the case, our Kekkei Genkei is still protected. Our main concern right now should be filling the vacant position of heiress to the Hyuga clan. Hisashi, you should address this immediately. It's important to the next generation of our clan to have a sense of stability regarding this subject. Hisashi remained silent, staring at the blood-stained piece of fabric in his hands. After a minute, his face rose and he stared directly into his brother's eyes. You, along with the rest of the party, will continue to search for her, he commanded firmly. Hisashi was shocked at Hiyashi's words, but the elders seemed more annoyed than anything that their commands were ignored. I refuse to believe that my daughter is dead, Hisashi. Until her body is found, until I see with my own eyes that she didn't survive whatever it was that attacked the caravans, I will not give up hope. Hisashi didn't even hesitate as he nodded in acknowledgement. I understand. We will continue to do everything we can to find her. Have you lost control of your senses, Hisashi? The lady elder asked furiously. The girl is definitely dead. We shouldn't be wasting valuable time and resources on finding her, and we should be thankful that whoever ambushed the caravan rid us of her presence, as well as keeping the Byakugan safe from Kumogakure. Don't even think of. She is still my daughter. Hisashi snapped, interrupting her. I do not care if she brought nothing but disappointment to you, or anyone else in the clan. All I care about at the moment is her safe return to me and Haruka. I am her father, and it is my responsibility to care for her. Your responsibility first and foremost is to this clan. The lady elder shouted back. We have been given no indication of where she could be found, if ever. There are no indications she is even alive. As head of this clan, you have more important matters to deal with, such as the safety of our clan. That is your main duty, Hisashi, and you cannot forego that at the expense of personal reasons. She waved her hand dismissively. This discussion is at an end. I will go and see the Hokage personally, and inform him of Kumogakure's treason. With the venomous words still hanging in the air, the Hyuga elders turned and left, not bothering to wait for a response. Neji remained silent as the heated discussion between the adults ended. He may be young, but he understood every word and insinuation they had said. It was clear that the elders couldn't care less if Hinata returned to the clan, and they were grateful that she would no longer be around to burden them with her presence. He balled his fists angrily and glared at the ground. No, she can't be dead, he thought to himself, holding back a fresh round of tears. Just like his uncle, he would refuse to believe it. Haruka stared numbly at the tranquil garden outside the window of her bedroom. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, her body exhausted from lack of sleep as she forced herself to stay awake, waiting for news about her kidnapped daughter. Every single thought was centered on Hinata, as she prayed non-stop for her safe return. As she stared listlessly out into the distance, she remembered the times she and Hinata played in the garden, pressing flowers for their collection. Her daughter had always been a sweet, gentle child. She had never complained, no matter how hard things became. The girl had a heart of gold, but despite everything she was, the clan never really appreciated her. Just because they thought she was weak. Why couldn't they see anything else aside from strength and skills? Hinata was strong in her own way. Why was it that this clan only focused on the outside, and not what was inside? Why couldn't they understand that inner strength was just as important, and sometimes even more so than outer strength? Haruka gripped the sheets of her futon. It should be me. My precious daughter should not be the one suffering, it should be me. Hinata was still so young and innocent. She had already faced enough difficulties in her short life, and was unprepared for anything else. Wherever Hinata was right now, Haruka was positive she was terrified. She wanted to get to where her little girl was and cradle her in her arms, gently stroking her hair to reassure her that she was safe, and everything would be all right. A faint sound from the door instantly broke her out of her thoughts. She turned to see her husband walking into the room. Where is she? She asked desperately, attempting to push herself up from the futon. Before she could do so, Hisashi immediately moved to her side, preventing her from overexerting herself. He gently placed his hands on his wife's shoulders in an attempt to calm her down. Hiyashi, is she back? Haruka asked with hopeful eyes. Take me to our daughter, please. I need to see her now and make sure she's unharmed. Hiyashi looked back at her with emotionless eyes, but she could feel the graveness behind them even as he tried to remain impassive. Hiyashi, her voice cracked. She was afraid that what she was thinking might possibly be true. Hizashi returned empty-handed, Hiyashi said flatly. When the search team arrived at the area, the Kumo ninja had all been killed. Someone, or something, had ambushed them. Our daughter's body was nowhere to be found at the site. Haruka held her breath, terror rising inside her chest. Hizashi found a trail of blood, our daughter's blood, leading to the river. They found nothing but a scrap of her clothing, her sleeve, to be specific. They expanded the search several times to the surrounding area, but were unable to locate her. Haruka's body began to tremble, and tears built up at the corners of her eyes as she clutched her husband's shirt in fear. Shush, she couldn't be. Shush, she's not dead. No, she said between sobs of heartbreak and pain, search for her. She must be out there somewhere. We can't leave her there. Please, Hiyashi, please. She's not dead, Hiyashi declared firmly. Our daughter is not dead. I sent Hizashi back to continue to search for her. I will do anything to find her, Haruka. I promise you, whatever it takes, I will find her. He said, his voice full of conviction as he wrapped his arms around his wife's fragile body. Haruka buried her face into her husband's chest, clinging to him as if her whole life depended on him. Just the mere thought of her daughter out there all by herself made her body feel more fragile and vulnerable than it already was. I don't know what I'd do if we lost her, Hiyashi. I can't live, not without Hinata, not without our precious daughter. She sobbed uncontrollably, her mind going hysterical once again. She's my world. She can't be the one out there, scared and all alone. It should have been me. Not her. What kind of mother am I if I can't even protect my only daughter? Hiyashi wrapped his arms tighter around his wife, not enough to hurt her, but enough to give her the support and comfort she needed. This entire ordeal was pushing him to his limits, and anything further might send him over the edge. He could not afford to become as hysterical as Haruka. He had to continue to be calm and rational, both for her and his daughter. He couldn't afford to think that Hinata was out there all alone, far away from the safety of their home, and it broke his heart, his cold, unfeeling heart, to see his wife suffer like this. Hiyashi had vowed long ago, not as the leader of the Hyuga clan but as himself, that he would protect Haruka and their daughter no matter what happened. And as of this moment, he had failed miserably. His daughter was not within the confines of the compound. He had no idea where she could be. His wife was emotionally and physically drained. His entire bloodline was in danger. But he refused to shed a single tear or show any emotion. He was the face of this clan, the strength and foundation, and furthermore, he was the strength of his wife right now. For once, he was grateful for that strength, because it gave him what he needed to deal with this crisis. He wasn't going to let Kumogakure get away with this. He'd make them pay. No matter what he had to do or how long it took, he would make them pay. We have to find her, Hiyashi. We have to find Hinata. Shush, she could be scared. She could be hurt. Shush, she must be crying out for us right now, wondering where we are. Haruka could hardly speak through her sobs, but her husband's warm embrace seemed to be calming her down a little bit. It will be fine, Haruka. She'll be fine, Hiyashi gently whispered as he rubbed her back soothingly. I need to see her. I need to see her alive and well. I need to see her smile. I need to hear her voice. The trembling in his wife's body faltered for a moment, and Hiyashi felt the tension in her body relax against his touch. A moment later, Haruka slumped in his arms, her body losing consciousness due to exhaustion. She'll be fine, Haruka. You were the one who told me. Hinata is a strong girl, Hiyashi said softly as he gently lowered her back onto the futon. Before he had the chance to call for a servant, he heard a faint knock on the door and he called for the person to enter. He was a bit surprised to see that it wasn't one of the servants, but instead it was Takagi, Haruka's personal doctor. After exchanging greetings, the doctor expressed his sadness over the clan's current state, especially about Hinata. Hiyashi knew that his daughter had grown fond of the doctor, and he once overheard Hinata say that she was thankful that Takagi took care of her mother. Dr. Takagi had developed a warm, caring feeling for the girl as well. Haruka-sama has dealt with far greater levels of stress lately than is healthy for her, and we cannot risk exposing her to further emotional anxiety. The doctor explained. It would be far too dangerous for her, especially in her current condition. Provide her with all the care she needs, and whatever happened last night, ensure that it doesn't repeat again. Your wife is carrying a child, and by my estimation she's 6 weeks along. Hiyoshi's eyes widened at the sudden news. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he had a chance to, the doctor continued. Her body has become far too weak to handle the strain of pregnancy. As it stands, we must take further precautions to ensure both Haruka-sama's and the unborn child's safety. The time from now until she gives birth will be very risky, and if we are careless it could lead to a miscarriage. When she wakes up, I will explain everything that you both need to do to help the baby survive. He paused, and looked sadly into the Hyuga leader's eyes. But I can give no assurances that Haruka-sama will survive the child's birth. Hiyoshi tore his gaze away from Takagi and looked down at his distressed wife. Haruka is pregnant, he said thoughtfully. Her emotional stress could cause a miscarriage if it were to happen again? The doctor only nodded solemnly. While the Hyuga were known for their stoic demeanor, Takagi had never been one to believe that the clan was entirely harsh, cold and unfeeling. What he was doing was like pouring salt on an already open wound, and he hated every minute of it, but it could not be avoided. For the safety of Hiyoshi's unborn child, and the future heir to the clan, it could not be avoided. 4 days later, Neji dodged a poor kick from his clearly inferior opponent. Once he found an opening, he readied his gentle fist and swiftly struck his attacker, hitting several tenketsu, causing the other boy to fall to the floor, unable to move. Compared to his exhausted sparring partner, not a single bead of sweat trickled down his forehead or drenched his skin. Not a single speck of dirt marred the cleanliness of his clothes, and not a single scratch or bruise had been made on his body. His opponent had failed to land even one hit on him, and once again, he'd won the match. Winner: Neji Hyuga. The teacher announced, and the whole class applauded his excellent performance. That is our final match for today. Those who lost must work harder to make sure you win your match next time in order to pass this test. Do your homework and come to class on time. The whole class chimed, yes sensei, except for Neji. He wasn't even listening to what was his instructor saying, and honestly, he didn't care anymore. All he did was to go straight to his desk, pack his things, and then leave the classroom. He hadn't talked to anyone the entire day, nor did he look at anyone, but he could hear their incessant gossiping about what was going on in the clan. Have you heard about his cousin? It's awful, isn't it? Yeah, but I heard she's a real spoiled brat. She was weak anyways, nobody in their clan wanted her around. SSSH. Idiot. He might hear you. The entire day he kept quiet, ignoring the gossip flying around the academy. His father told him to ignore what others might say and not to stoop to their level, but the non-stop barrage of horrible things they were saying about his cousin caused him to reach his limit. Neji spun angrily around and walked towards the source of comments he just heard. He saw a boy and a girl, and he knew right away that the boy was the one who said Hinata was weak and nobody wanted her around. Shut up, you don't know her, he shouted, pushing the boy down. The boy cowered in fear and covered his face before Neji could lunge at him. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that about her. A crowd gathered around them, curious as to what had happened. Neji hesitated for a moment, deciding if he should beat up the pathetic, snotty kid. If Hinata were here, she would definitely stop him from beating up the boy. He felt a stabbing pain in his chest as he thought about her and her kindness, and seeing the kid's ugly face only drove his anger higher. Without sparing the kid another word or glance, he swiftly spun and headed towards the exit. Once outside, Neji ran as fast as he could to get out of anyone's sight. As he did so, a memory, fresh from this morning, played once again in his mind, and as before, he hated it. I'm very sorry, Hiyoshi. We did everything we could, we searched everywhere, but… Neji could hear his father's sad and forlorn voice from the other side of the door. The boy halted in his tracks, masking his presence in order to listen to the conversation. Suddenly, he heard a firm thud from inside the room, and he peered through a crack in the door, in order to see what had happened inside. I apologize for failing you. My brother, Hisashi said. Neji saw his father kneeling before the clan leader, who had collapsed onto the floor, his hands pressed hard against his face. The boy's eyes widened. Oh, God, Hinata? "Oh, God? I'm so sorry, my daughter," Hiyashi said in a cracked voice. Neji knew at once that Hiyashi was crying. "It's been 4 days, Hiyashi." She wouldn't. Hisashi placed a supportive hand on his brother's shoulder, she wouldn't have survived the waterfall. And in that moment, Neji's whole world stopped. Of all memories he held, of all those he wanted to forget, that one short memory was the one he hated the most, and the one he most wanted to forget. He wanted all of this to be a nightmare that he just needed to wake up from. He wanted to see his cousin alive and well, smiling back at him. No one dared to stop him or follow him, except for one boy. "Hey!" Neji knew the owner of the loud voice that had just shouted at him, but he didn't care. He'd already ignored everyone else in school, and he wasn't ever going to speak to that kid after what happened to Hinata, to his clan. He was the last person he wanted to see in the entire world. "Jerk. Hey, stop." Neji continued running, wishing that annoying kid would just give up. But then, "You stupid jerk." Naruto screamed as loud as he could before he managed to tackle Neji from behind, causing them to fall down and roll forward through the dirt. Once they recovered, Neji glared at Naruto and asked, "What the heck do you think you're doing? I was calling you and you wouldn't stop, you idiot. Are you deaf or something?" Naruto yelled back as he wiped the dirt from his clothes. "Don't you dare talk to me." Neji seethed, turning to walk away. Naruto felt his blood boil in anger. He blocked Neji's path and glared back at him with the same intensity of those Hyuga eyes. "I don't care who you are, long hair. Tell me what in the world happened to my friend Hinata." For a whole week he'd missed seeing her. She wasn't even attending their afternoon practices and he hadn't heard anything from her for almost a week, but today, her name was on everyone's lips. And he kept hearing that she was gone. Hearing that scared him to death. "You don't have the right to know anything about her, monster." Neji spat at him, as he ground his teeth. "Now get out of my way. Fat chance of that happening unless you tell me what I want to know." Naruto remained undeterred. He was finding it hard keeping his temper under control. "Where is Hinata?" For some reason, hearing Naruto say Hinata's name irritated Neji more than ever. Without thinking, he lunged suddenly at Naruto and they began to fight in the dirt. "Bring it on, idiot!" Naruto exclaimed, rolling over Neji and punching him in the face. A crowd gathered around them to watch their brawl, which lasted for about 5 minutes. They both knelt on the ground, panting and glaring at each other, ignoring everyone else. Just tell me where she is, Neji," Naruto said once again, this time in a gentler, pleading tone. He needed to know what happened to his only friend, his precious friend. He just wanted to hear that what everyone was saying about her was nothing but lies. What they were saying seemed too unreal to be true. He refused to believe any of it. So even if Neji was one of the last people he wanted to talk to, he did if he could hear something about Hinata. Neji heard the sincerity in Naruto's voice and for a moment, he was caught off guard. He wasn't a fool. He knew very well that his cousin had developed a special liking to this boy in front of him. Hinata felt something for this boy that everyone else despised, and he never understood why. What had she found in Uzumaki Naruto? What had she seen in a failure like him? He clenched his fists, strong emotions mixing in his pale Hyuga eyes as he stared back at Naruto's blue orbs. "You really want to know what happened to my cousin?" he asked in a low voice. Naruto said nothing, letting him continue. "She was kidnapped by the ninja delegation from Kumo, and now she's dead." Naruto's eyes widened. Both of them remained silent for a couple of seconds before Naruto spoke, breaking the tension. What? His voice trembling in obvious fear. "Hyuga Hinata, his friend, his only friend, she was dead? I don't believe you. Take that back, you jerk," he yelled. He would have tackled Neji again and pinned him on the ground to punch that annoying face of his if he wasn't feeling so weak and scared right now. "Hinata-sama is dead," Neji shouted. "My cousin is gone and I couldn't do anything to protect her." Tears threatened to fall from his eyes due to sadness and rage. "Whether I tell you or not, it won't change anything. You can't bring my cousin back. And don't you dare speak her name. A low-life, good-for-nothing like you doesn't deserve to speak her name." "Shut up," Naruto screamed, rushing forward once again to punch Neji in the face. The Hyuga managed to maintain his balance, but before he could counter, Naruto grabbed his collar and yanked him forward to within inches of his face. "You take that back. She's my friend. She can't be dead, you liar." He blinked his eyes and tears streamed down his cheeks. "If she's really dead, then why aren't you crying for her? This time Neji had no argument for the loud-mouthed brat. The air was thick between the two, because they both knew how much each of them cared about the girl. They were just angry at themselves, that neither of them had been able to protect that sweet, innocent girl who was most precious to them. Neji hated himself for failing in his duty as her protector. Naruto hated himself for not being there to protect his only friend when she needed him the most. Neji. The tension was cut when Ko suddenly appeared. They were separated when Ko firmly pulled Neji away, leading him back home to the compound, leaving Naruto standing all alone. When Neji finally arrived home, he found out that he had lost his father as well. When she opened her eyes, she saw nothing familiar about her surroundings. Not the ceiling in the room, the window overlooking the garden, or the soft feeling of her bed. She stirred slightly and felt a stiff, cold sensation down her back, causing her to wince. Where am I? She was on a bed that didn't belong to her. When her eyes finally adjusted to the dim lighting, she noticed she was inside a small room that was poorly illuminated by a lamp in one corner. She struggled to sit up, trying to remember what happened to. Before she could finish her thought, images flashed through her head of things she'd seen before she passed out. The ninja backhanding her when she wouldn't be quiet, the moving caravan, the bindings that had been placed around her mouth and wrists. Then came the horrendous screams from outside the wagon, that ninja being killed right in front of her, blood spattering everywhere. And finally, that man who resembled a snake glaring down at her, before darkness overtook her. Hinata began to hyperventilate from the memories of that night. Where am I? She wanted to scream and call for help, but her throat was too dry to bring out her voice. She didn't know where she was or how she got to this place, but one thing was sure, she was definitely far from home. I see you're awake, little princess. The voice sent a chill down her spine, and her face paled even further. Tears of fright formed in the corner of her eyes, and the cold air burned as she sucked it in and out of her lungs. Who are you? She barely managed to say. Her eyes roamed across the room, looking for the source of the voice. Her body began to shake as she saw a figure emerge from the shadows. It was the same man who killed all those Kumo ninjas. His eyes with narrow, snake-like pupils glared down at her, like a predator eyeing its prey. Hinata pulled the sheets of the bed close to her body, trying to hide as much of herself as she could from the man, and retreated towards the farthest corner of the room. Now don't be scared, little princess. I don't have use for weaklings, Orochimaru said, as he walked calmly towards the girl, but don't you worry. You are very special, Hyuga Hinata. Stay away, Hinata pleaded. You'll be far more useful to me than you would have been to those insolent fools from Kumo. I disposed of them personally, so that neither they, nor your family won't have to worry about coming back to look for you. Ever. Orochimaru chuckled lowly. He sat on the edge of the bed and reached out to touch her pale cheek. From now on, you will be under my care. The first memory Hinata would create from her time being imprisoned by Orochimaru was the touch of his hand, because it made her entire body turn cold. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.